Imagine a world where dozens of cities are missing from maps, their place taken by empty forests, nameless fields, or even entirely fictional coordinates. Behind tall fences here, tens of thousands of people live and work, their names and destinies hidden under the label Top Secret. In these invisible spots on the map, discoveries were made that changed the course of history, and instead of real addresses, passports and letters, listed only mysterious post office boxes. Sound like science fiction? For more than 1.5 million Soviet citizens, this was everyday reality. While the United States built separate secret facilities, the USSR created a parallel geography, over 100 closed cities, some with populations of up to 100,000 people. Today, we'll look behind the barbed wire of these places and find out whether greatness can be achieved under conditions of unfreedom, and what the true price of scientific breakthrough really is. The 1960s, a city where every morning thousands of people set off to work. Underground. Krasnoarsk 26, also known as Железногорск, was perhaps the most extraordinary of all the USSR's closed cities. Here, carved into a granite mountain, lay a vast underground complex spanning several square kilometers and reaching depths of up to 200 meters. According to archival records, in 1950, military construction crews and prisoners were sent here, into the Siberian taiga. Their mission was to build, deep within the mountain, an underground facility to house the first Soviet industrial reactor for producing weapons-grade plutonium. As many as 70,000 prisoners worked around the clock in 3 shifts, enduring extremely harsh conditions. Historians report that the underground complex included not only workshops for the AD, ADE-1 and ADE-2 reactors, but also a fully developed infrastructure, medical stations, cafeterias, an underground reservoir, and a power plant. The life support system was engineered for long-term autonomous operation in the event of nuclear war, and the heat generated by the reactor was used to warm the entire city. On the surface, a settlement emerged with beautiful architecture, well-kept parks, theaters, and sports complexes. The standard of living here was significantly higher than in neighboring towns. Salaries exceeded the regional average by 40 to 60%, and the social infrastructure developed at an accelerated pace. This was the reality in all of the closed cities. One interesting fact is that even many of the city's residents did not know the true purpose of the underground facilities. Officially, it was believed that a military factory was located beneath the mountain. Only in 1992 was information about the underground complex partially declassified, and the last ADE-2 reactor was shut down only in 2010, after operating for 46 years. But it wasn't just underground cities that kept their secrets. In the endless steppes of Kazakhstan, another symbol of Soviet secrecy was taking shape, Baikonur. This is probably the most famous of all the USSR's closed cities. Yet, what would become humanity's gateway to space began as an almost impossible challenge in the middle of the Kazakh desert. Construction took place under extreme conditions. In summer, air temperatures soared to plus 50 degrees Celsius, while in winter, they dropped to minus 40 degrees Celsius, and the ground itself could heat up to an incredible 70 degrees. The first builders, mostly military personnel, lived in tents and dugouts. Water was scarce. It had to be delivered in tankers from hundreds of kilometers away. According to eyewitnesses, the conditions were so harsh that some conscript soldiers desperately tried to escape, wandering off into the desert with nowhere to go. To conceal the Cosmodrome's location, the authorities carried out a large-scale disinformation campaign. The launch site was named after a small village, Baikonur, which was actually 320 kilometers away from the real facility, and fake launch structures were built there, wooden rockets and a mock construction site, so that from the air, everything would look like a real cosmodrome. For a while, This really did confuse the Americans, but by 1960, with the arrival of U-2 spy plane photos, the true location of the site was finally uncovered. While the whole world knew about the USSR's achievements in space, its nuclear program, darkened by radiation disasters, was developed in true ghost towns. Arzamas 16, Sarov, Ozyorsk, Novouralsk. These places remained blank spots on the map, even though hundreds of thousands of people lived there. Academician and Nobel laureate Andrei Sakharov, who worked on the Soviet hydrogen bomb, wrote in his memoirs, "I could not help but realize how terrible, how inhuman the things we were doing were. But the war had just ended. That too was an inhuman affair. I had not been a soldier in that war, but I felt like a soldier in this one, the scientific and technological war." According to historians, the Soviet atomic cities were very different from America's Los Alamos. While the American center was a temporary scientific settlement without families, the Soviet closed cities were fully developed communities with advanced social infrastructure, a feature common to all of the USSR's closed cities. Yet alongside this prosperity, there was another reality. Chelyabinsk, 40, Ozyorsk, is infamous for the 1957 accident now known as the Kishtim disaster, which condemned 270,000 people to radiation exposure. The world learned about the third largest nuclear disaster after Chernobyl and Fukushima only after the collapse of the USSR in 1992, when the first documents were declassified. The consequences are still felt today. Exclusion zones remain in the affected areas, and among residents and their descendants, the rate of cancer is many times higher than average, a substance with no taste, color, or smell. Just a few drops of it can take a life in mere minutes. This isn't a plot from a Hollywood thriller, but a reality born in the shadow of the Soviet military machine. In the very heart of the Volga region, among hills and endless forests, there was a closed city, Shikani. Here, in the 1970s and 80s, Soviet scientists developed chemical weapons capable of changing the rules of war. It was in these laboratories that Novichok was created, a nerve agent 8 to 10 times more lethal than sarin and hundreds of times more toxic than mustard gas, which once spread terror on the battlefields of World War I. The price of these developments was extremely high. Dozens of scientists and lab workers became victims of their own inventions. One of the most well-known cases is that of chemist Andrei Zheleznyakov. In 1987, after an accident in the lab, he was exposed to the substance and fell into a coma for 2 weeks. He managed to survive, but spent the rest of his life with severe health problems, suffering from toxic hepatitis, epilepsy, and permanent disability. He died 5 years later, never having recovered. Later, this was described by Vil Mirzayanov, a Soviet chemist who became a whistleblower. In his publications, he wrote about how, at the sites where chemical weapons were developed, protective measures often did not match the level of risk, and cases of severe poisoning were routinely covered up. By 1992, Russia had signed the Chemical Weapons Convention, and Shikani became a center for destroying the very arsenals that had been developed there for decades. However, echoes of the past returned in 2018, when the city was once again in the world's headlines after the poisoning of former GRU officer Sergei Skripal in Salisbury, England. What was everyday life like in a city that didn't exist on the map? Even the addresses here weren't real. Instead of familiar street names and house numbers, passports and envelopes listed what was called a post office box, a special code or number like Arzamas 16, Sarov 16, Gorky 130, or simply Post Office Box 550. All these names referred to the same place, but none of them revealed its actual location. This system was invented to hide not only the city's whereabouts, but the very fact of its existence. Letters sent to such an address went through special filtering before finally reaching the recipient. For the outside world, the city remained invisible. Inside, though, life went on as usual, but according to special rules. Stores here had no lines, and the shelves were stocked with far more than you'd find in ordinary shops. Goods that most Soviet citizens could only dream of. In some ways, these cities were like a paradise. Housing was distributed more quickly, salaries were higher, and the social infrastructure was of much better quality. But this comfort came at a price. Every step was under control. Any trip outside the city required permission, and having relatives visit turned into a whole special operation. Even within the city, there were strict rules. You needed a special pass to work or move around, and talking about your real activities was strictly forbidden. On the other hand, there was complete safety here. Crime rates were extremely low, and residents almost never faced danger on the streets. Childhood in such conditions was special too. Good schools, clubs, libraries, and sports sections, all of this shaped a new generation of specialists. But as soon as you left to study on the mainland, it became clear. The world you were used to was not the norm, but an exception, carefully guarded by the state. With the collapse of the Soviet Union, many closed cities opened their gates for the first time and faced a reality for which no one was prepared. These islands of prosperity quickly turned into single industry towns where old guarantees disappeared and secrecy could no longer protect against economic hardship. Today, there are officially 38 zetos, closed administrative territorial formations, left in Russia. In some places, life still echoes the past. Zhelezhnogorsk has become a center of the space industry, and Sarov is now one of the country's main IT hubs. Even now, many residents believe that special status is not just a memory of former secrecy, but also a guarantee of safety and quality of life. Closed cities became one of the most paradoxical phenomena of the 20th century. They were born from a mix of scientific ambition and security demands, often built at great cost and sacrifice. Yet they created a unique environment where breakthrough technologies emerged. Their history raises difficult questions about the balance between security and freedom, the price of technological progress, and the possibility of creative development under restrictions. What would you choose? This was Julie from the Soviet Born channel. See you soon.